Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the GTSRL's Season 37, and today we are looking at EU Division 2. We're on site in round 3 at Sardinia in Italy, Sardinia Road Track A to be specific. All of our drivers are turning up at the circuit if they're not already here already, and we have got some fantastic racing line ahead tonight. With the fantastic drivers, we have got some ferocious Ferraris which they'll need to conquer around the circuit. I'm your host, Paul TX141 Walsh, also known as Britain a Spit, depending on what media you follow me on. And you are back with those EU Division 2 guys that we've been following for the last 3 weeks, every Tuesday. And, well, it has been one heck of a story to tell. Not necessarily in terms of the championship lead, but definitely up and down the field. And there have been some surprises, a lot of drama, and indeed a lot of chaos all the way through. But nonetheless, hope you're all doing well and that you've had a good start to your week. What with it being the halfway point tomorrow, we all love to get past that halfway point of the working week on a Wednesday. But before we do, let's head out to the track and see and introduce our drivers one last time for this season. So the story so far then, well, particularly carrying on from round 2, is that we have one driver in particular who has been on top form throughout the season and has really dominated at every track we've been to so far. He was unstoppable at... My apologies, I was about to let off win there. He was unstoppable at Goodwood in the Minis, and he was also unstoppable at Tokyo in the GTO, and that was Zenku Meister, the Polish driver here, waiting in the pits, currently sat at the top of the leaderboards on 98 points, and picked up two 49-point tallies back-to-back, the perfect score for both evenings. That's where you get 3 wins in all 3 races, so 14 points for each of the first 2 wins, and then 21 points for the bonus point round, which is race number 3, and Zenku has really been unchallenged throughout this whole season, and we'll wait to see whether he's able to pull off the triple tonight in terms of getting 3 wins back to back again, and also on top of that pick up the pole lap as well. We'll find out, but Zenku has been in the world of his own. The gap between him and second being an almighty 11 points, which is quite a margin to overcome, but still, if one driver is going to do it, it's going to be this man here, the British driver of Notnats GT, running around in the communist China mobile on those 87 points at the moment. Notnats really has been the best challenger for Zenku and has been the driver who's been up towards the front of the order, chasing after Zenku in the races, and he is indeed Zenku's teammate as well, so he's been acting as a good cover driver for Zenku as well if there's ever been a need to be concerned about a potential overtake into turn 1. Notnats has been the one there trying to look at Zenku, but also at the same time keeping one eye on the guys behind. Now Notnats, talking about his story and his progress over the course of the season thus far, as we say hello to Zoronic in the chat, is that in the first round back at Goodwood he had a good string of results, 2 second places and a 3rd place, and that was pretty much echoed at Tokyo last time out with a 2nd place and then 2 3rd places. Of course, he is in direct competition with a fellow British driver, and that is Aaron Watt, as he races around the circuit here coming up towards turn number 6. On a practice lap. Aaron Watt has been the 3rd best driver really of the competition so far, and has gradually become more and more of a competitor for Notnats GT as we've gone deeper into the season. Whilst his results at Goodwood were good, unsurprisingly they could have been better, and that's why he's on 80 points and 7 points away from Notnats, and that's really where he fell down by comparison with Notnats. In Goodwood he picked up a string of results giving him 35.5 points, whereas he really came alive at Tokyo last time out in the Mitsubishi Twin Turbo GTO, picking up 44.5 points for a 2nd place, in race number 2, a 3rd place in race 1, and a 2nd place in race number 3. So getting a huge number of points and inching him ever closer to Notnats in the competition for 2nd place in the championship. You then have to go a further 9 points down the road to the birthday boy in our pack today, and that is the Austrian driver of Pingophone, who's currently sat in the pits on 71 points, as we said. Pingophone being one of those drivers who really has had to bounce back after what was a very difficult start to the season at Goodwood, in race 1 in particular, being the gentleman waiting for a fellow driver to rejoin the track, but they could never get the car rejoined, which meant Pingo had to sacrifice any results in that race 1, and it was all about the comeback effort, and Pingo has bounced back monumentally. And in round number 2 at Tokyo it was the same story, in race 1 picking up a 4th place, in race 2 dropping down the order, and then in race number 3 picking up a 4th place once again. So Pingo has really fought tooth and nail to get himself into this fight for P4 in the championship, and being just an arm's length away from P3 in the championship as well. However, he is being closely pursued by Will Becky, the British driver as seen here, who is currently sitting 5th in the Drivers' Championship on 70 points. Will having a good set of fortunes in rounds 1 and 2, and in terms of highlight results, picking up 2 4th places back to back in races 1 and 2 of round 1. And on top of that as well, picking up 2 consistent 5th places in races 2 and 3 of round number 2. Will has been very consistent in the midfield, towards the top end of the midfield, and it's Will's consistency that's put him in this position to be challenging Pingo for the 4th place. And perhaps if Iron Watt drops some points today, could even see Will jumping up into 3rd, but we will wait and find out. Then you've got a little bit of a gap to go down to the Welshman of Jenkster 86, who is running around at the moment up towards turn 13. Jenkster sat on 61.5 points, so 8.5 points off of Will Becky in P6, and Jenkster has had one of the interesting starts to the season whereby it didn't go all to plan in round 1, in the fact that the results did not quite fit in perhaps with where he wanted to be, but he put in a huge amount of effort nonetheless at Goodwood, and it was in round number 2 where things really started to come alive for the driver, in the fact that at Tokyo he was able to pull off a 5th place finish, a 4th place finish, and then in the race number 3 things didn't quite work out as much, in the end picking up what was a 7th place finish in race number 3, but still good points on the table for Jenkster, and he really has been one of those drivers who are new to the GTSRL community as a season 37. He's definitely established himself as a consistent driver for points haul, just got to eliminate some of those niggly little gremlins, but for the most part been a very strong driver and definitely establishing his credentials for a top end EU Division 2 driver, and perhaps even looking for a chase for EU Division 1 in the seasons ahead. As he makes his way into the wall on exit of turn 4 there, just drifting the car a little bit sideways and then parking it on the apex of turn 5. Tamir taking some evasive action. We then have to move down to Fussy and Fiery, who sat in P7 in the championship standings for the drivers. 4 points down on Jenkster. Fussy and Fiery, the British driver here, running around and doing a relatively good job over the course of the season. Another newcomer to the GTSRL community, and it's been a season of, well, really consistency all the way through, in the fact that in round number 1 he was able to pick up a total points haul of 31 points, his best result being a 5th place in race number 1 at Goodwood, and then in round number 2 at Tokyo. Mixed fortunes to begin with, finishing practically last of the pack in race number 1, but then really bounced back in races 2 and 3, with his best result being a P6 finish in race number 3. And really, Fussy and Fiery, again, much like Jenkster, has been one of those drivers who's been very consistent in being towards the top end of that midfield and just picking up the points where others drop them, and that's something which I'm sure he'll be targeted to do once again today as he makes his way out of turn 13 there. We then move down to P8 in the Drivers' Championship, and that means we have to head over to one Spinky Biltong, or Spinky as we call him short. The British driver here trying to get himself reset after getting it very wrong by looks of things coming out to turn 6. We all know the feeling, we saw that happen yesterday to some drivers. But in the case of Spinky on those 48 points, really leading the competition for P8 in the Drivers' Championship, having had a little bit of a weak performance in round number 1 at Goodwood, but a much better performance in round number 2 at Tokyo. His best result over the course of round number 2 being what was a correct me if I'm wrong here, ladies and gentlemen, in the end it was a 8th place finish in race number 3, picking up some very solid points there and really just continuing his campaign on track. But he is being chased very rapidly by the American racing under a German flag, and that's Insubordinate 73, who's only half a point down in P9 in the Drivers' Championship on 47.5 points. And Insubordinate, last time out of Tokyo, having a pretty dismal set of results compared to what he perhaps wanted, particularly in the fact that things just didn't seem to work too well, meaning he only picked up 22 points compared to his 25.5 that he picked up at Goodwood. But Insubordinate was one of those drivers who started off the season on a very strong note, in the fact that he qualified very well at Goodwood, and in race number 1 was able to pick up P3, but then he's seen himself drop quite a way back into the mid-pack of the field and hasn't really had a glimpse of the podium since that point. But of course we'll wait and see if he's back on the podium tonight. And I think Insubordinate is looking to achieve a big result tonight. He wants to really push hard and say to everybody, look, because of the fact that round 2 in particular didn't go too well and my follow-up races in round 1 didn't go too well, doesn't mean I'm shy of getting on that step of the podium. As we hop away from Insubordinate then, and we now come over to the Liverpool Football Club supporter. I believe that's what LCFC stands for. And that is Ben, LCFC Ben, as we look around the circuit. And here we find him. He is from the United Kingdom on 40.5 points in P10 in the Drivers' Championship. And Ben, much like Insubordinate, has not seen results necessarily go his way throughout the season. And it's been a difficult one for Ben as a result. In the fact, in round number 1, he picked up 24 points. But in round number 2 at Tokyo, 16.5 points for what was a very difficult evening for Ben, and didn't really see him pick up any major results, normally finishing towards the back. But of course, round number 2 does not define what's going to happen in round number 3, so we'll wait and see what Ben's able to achieve today. And then, last but not least, coming down towards P11 in our Drivers' Championship is the Egyptian driver racing under the Saudi Arabian flag, and that is Tamer 2010, or you'll know him in the GTSRL community as Yeetle, but we'll refer to him as Tamer for this point onwards. Tamer has been the last of our drivers in terms of the races on average, but still he's been a great sportsman throughout, and he's been one of those drivers who you love to see him running it hard across the line wherever he can, and he's been working very hard over the course of the season to try and pick up points here and there, and definitely has picked up points where others have fallen. In round number 2, last time out of Tokyo, he picked up some reasonable results in the fight for the rear of the pack, getting one top 10 finish as well, if I remember correctly, in race number 1, but unfortunately he had to retire the car in race number 3, which meant he didn't pick up any points there. Now, how does this all translate into the team standings? What are the fact we've got 11 drivers racing today? Well, currently the Constructors is being led quite significantly by team number 1, consisting of Zenkyu and also the driver from Communist China, that is not Nash GT, sorry, sponsored by our glorious Communist China, I should say, not Nash GT here. Those two drivers pooling together 185 points, and of course them being first and second in the Drivers' Championship. You would expect that. They're doing a very good job, and as Mal says there on the back of Not Nats's car, be sure to drive safe, folks. We then got quite a gap of 44 points down to Team 5, who are second in the Constructors as it currently stands, consisting of Will Becky and also Pingophone, as we look to find Pingophone, who is currently provisionally fastest of our order that are running out on circuit in terms of its practice session. Pardon me, but he has not set the fastest lap in practice. That's gone to RM Watt, the Austrian driver making his way into turn 1. And then we have got a little bit of a gap down to P3 in the Constructors. You have got a gap of what is 13.5 points to Team 3 on 127.5 points, consisting of the aforementioned RN Watt, the driver in P10 here, and also we have got Insubordinate, the American driver racing under the German flag, of course, and these two are working very hard to try and get into the fight for P2 in the Constructors. Fortunately for them, they've got 22 points between them and Team 6, who are currently sat 4th in the Constructors' Championship, consisting of one Spinky Biltong and also Fussy and Fiery, who we will hop over to now as Fussy and Fiery comes into the pits. So we do not want to get trapped in the pits with the camera, and we're getting our first stuck check of the evening underway. So we're just going to wait a couple of seconds to get this stuck check done, where we have to do one lap around the circuit due to the current server issues on GT Sport with the lobbies. But whilst we are waiting for the start check to commence, give you an idea of what it's like for all of our drivers to launch off of the start line. So lights out and away we go, as all our drivers pull off the line, and this of course gives them a great opportunity to practice starting the car, i.e. getting used to the standing start and running up into turn 1. And as all our drivers charge up there, they also get a feel for what it's like all crowding into the tight apex of turn 1. A very unforgiving corner, turn 1 at Sardinia Road Track A, in the fact that whilst it looks quite wide, the apex closes very rapidly, and now as you can see, Notnat's got it very wrong there on the brakes and has actually completely missed the corner and dropped all the way down the field. As they all charge up towards turn number 4 for the first time asking, a lot of contact amongst our drivers, a lot of elbows being put out here, but also our drivers will need to get used to the width of the car. It's not that wide of a car compared to the Mitsubishi GTO we ran last week, the Ferrari 512 BB from 1976, but of course our drivers will get used to the width of the car and what they can and can't do in terms of defensive driving into the corners and how late can they brake when on that inside line, which offers a bit less grip perhaps than the outside to inside line, the natural racer line, as we see RM Watt and Zenkyu having a very nice battle in into turn 6 there. And we look a little bit further back right now, and we can see Fussy and Fiery and Pingo Phone chasing one another up the hill, as it looks so Spinky's got it all sorts of wrong coming out of turn 7 there. A difficult corner to get flat out if you're not used to the fact you gradually need to apply more and more steering as you go through the corner. And with the rear end of this Ferrari drifting very heavily, I think Spinky's been caught out by that as he goes for an absolutely savage lunge on Will Becky into turn 9 and makes it work. Will being very compliant there to make sure that Spinky didn't go and take him off the circuit. Will being very aware of what Spinky was up to, and that was a great move by Spinky as a result, as they all come up towards the very dangerous combination of 11 and 12, where you've got to try and toss the car right and then toss it left. Spinky drifting very sideways, all of our drivers going very sideways in fact through the corner, and as they all come down towards turn 13, the final hairpin of the circuit before the flat out run through 14 to the finish line, we can see that ZenQ is at the head of the pack, having started a bit further down, and ZenQ going into this race was a bit concerned about the car in the fact he didn't feel too comfortable with it, but definitely starting to get a bit more comfortable with it now is the Polish driver, as he makes his way across the finish line and picks up the first stuck check win of tonight. So that concludes the start check, and it looks as though everybody's doing alright in terms of the fact they're all able to pull off the line, and there's been no disconnects or any major latency spikes by the looks of things. As we look back to the chat and we say hello to Johnny Powell, also known as Feel the Vibes in chat, who was racing in the EU Division 1 yesterday, and despite spinning the car at one point, putting out a very good set of performances, and I think was actually for me my driver of the day yesterday for working so hard, particularly in race number 3. So that was the first start check completed, and now we're going to be very shortly hopping back to the pack, to the field, to introduce the rest of the Constructors' Championship and what exactly is happening. So we carry on from where we left off in the fact we talked about Team 6 in a 4th place in the Constructors on 105.5 points, but they are being chased very closely by our 5th place Constructors team as it provisionally stands, and that is team number 2 on 102 points, so only 3.5 points down, consisting of LCFC Ben and also Jenkster 86. I've got to make sure I pronounce that name right. I don't know why I do not pronounce my J's as J's. But Jenkster right now coming down towards turn 1, and he is one of the 2 drivers racing for Team 2, and LCFC Ben, who is just behind him, is the other driver, of course. Not running matching liveries tonight, but a very fetching blue livery there for the Ferrari of LCFC Ben to contrast with the Welsh livery of Jenkster. And then last but not least in the Constructors at the moment, pretty much propping up the team by himself, in fact propping up the entirety of Team 7 by himself, and this is why you've got to give a round of applause for Tamir, no matter where he finishes tonight, because he's worked very hard to prop up Team 7 all by himself, running on 26 points, so I do not think they're going to be making their way any further up the field, but still doing his utmost to represent Team 7. So that's how the Constructors lies, and really I would say the Constructors has been tied up for Team 1 in terms of who's going to finish first, but it's the big question who's going to be finishing in 2nd place and also who's going to be finishing in 4th place in the competition. And as we've introduced the field, and we say hello to Pingo Phone as well, who I believe it's his birthday today, so be sure to say happy birthday to Pingo Phone in the chat as well. It's his birthday race. We are now really waiting for any further start checks, and I think we're also giving some practice time to all of our drivers, waiting for confirmation if anything else is coming through. And for the time being, everyone's going to use this time just to get a greater feel for the car, try and get their lap times down as low as possible, and see what they can achieve before the qualifying situation kicks off. And we also say hello to Robert DiMacchiro in the chat. How you doing, Robert? So, whilst we are waiting for things to get underway, let's take you through a guided lap, and we ride on board this time with Not GT, who's coming around to start a first fast lap in this practice session. So coming across the start finish line to begin the timer, we can see coming up the hill here going to be in 4th gear and braking very hard at the 150 board. You can see the 150 board on your right, and coming down to 2nd gear, and what you're going to see him do is gradually ease the car off the brakes and then onto the throttle, going through the apex of turn 1 up into 2, and then upshifting a little bit late on the upshift there and bounced off the rev limiter before turning into turn 3, and now upshifting into 4th gear. Now coming up to turns 4 and 5, the sequence here where he's coming down to 2nd gear Pardon me, he's coming down to second gear, and I would personally recommend you want to be in third gear for turn 4 because otherwise it will destabilise the car, as you saw what happened to Not That's there with the rear end kicked out because of the secondary downshift. And now out of 5, going up into third, and now charging up towards turn 6, completing sector 1, braking just after the 50 board. I'd say you probably want to brake a little bit earlier to get the tightest possible line, but we did see yesterday that you've got a lot of mechanical grip around the outside at turn 6, and now going through 7 completely flat out and upshifting to 4th gear as late as possible because you are going uphill here, and those revs really do matter. Then through 8, which is just a simple flat out left-hander, which is banked, so as a result you're going over a blind summit, and now braking down for turn 9 here, coming all the way down to second gear. Got to get the car stopped as much as possible and then flick it into the hairpin before getting on the accelerator as soon as possible. Through 10, the right-hander kink there, which you've got to have the confidence just to simply plant the throttle and turn the steering wheel in, and now going all the way up, coming up to turns 11 and 12 now. Turn 11, lifting off a little bit there to stabilise the car, and then snapping on the brake for turn 12. Not too heavy on the brake, but coming down to third gear all the same in order to chuck the car into turn 12. Now the final hairpin of the circuit, turn 13. I think he's gone a little bit deep, and in fact coming down to first gear has Not That's there, which you can do. You can go down to first gear, but you do have to be aware of the fact that means you're going to really overcook the rear wheels as you come out of the hairpin there. A number of drivers yesterday were coming down to second gear, and in turn 14 to complete the lap, just piling it through here, full throttle, no hesitation, and that is a lap of the Sardinia Road Track A circuit in our Ferrari. And hello to Rizurin. Sorry, I'm going to say this again because I'm going to mispronounce the name otherwise. Hello to Rizurin, how you doing? And good to hear you're doing well, Robert. And as we're really waiting for the timer to come down, we have still got 9 minutes to go. What are my personal predictions for this one, or what can we perhaps expect? Well, given the fact at the moment ZenQ does not seem to have set the fastest lap in the practice session, whether he's just biding his time, or well, I say he's not set the fastest lap, and then he crosses the start-finish line with the fastest lap, but not by a huge margin, it should be pointed out. And Iron Watt did set a 1:58 in the earlier practice session before we did the start check. The big question you've got to wonder is, will ZenQ dominate this one? I think it's going to be a harder one for ZenQ to dominate this time. I think the combination is perhaps not to his liking by comparison to the previous two, so it could be the case that 1 or 2 savvy drivers may be able to get themselves ahead of ZenQ on the opening lap, as ZenQ is lagging a bit as well. Otherwise we would have seen him rebound off the wall there rather than Constantino himself off the wall at turn 4. But I think if ZenQ is not able to keep the lead going out of the first sector in particular, so by the time if he gets to this point, if he hasn't got the lead, I think that's where things could start to trickle in, because he's had a runaway effect so far in the previous 2 races, and the fact as soon as he's cleared the first sector of the circuit, he's already far enough up the road not to feel any further pressure, or immediate pressure I should point out, from the other drivers. Of course he's got the pressure in his mind most likely, but he's been able to control the race a lot more. But if he's not allowed to pull away, or a driver gets in front of him, then there will be a much bigger question asked to ZenQ. At the moment he's been a runaway leader, much like say a Lewis Hamilton or a Michael Schumacher, but we need to see what happens if he is put under that pressure, and I think that pressure will be here tonight. Now in terms of drivers who I think could be looking to take a win or two off of ZenQ, or definitely competing for the win, we've got our standard pair of RM Watt and Not Nat Shitu, who have been competing with one another non-stop over the course of this season. I think either of these 2 drivers could be on course for a potential win tonight, and just remember, in the case of Not Nats, if he does pick up the win, it's not his win, it's not anybody else's win, it's our glorious win, because he's doing it for all of us. But anyway, milking that joke to death, I think the thing about RM Watt that we've seen compared to Not Nats is RM Watt just seems to be able to get acquainted with the car a little bit faster by comparison with Not Nats. Not to say Not Nats isn't good at getting acquainted with the car, but when RM Watt is thrown by these combinations, he's just seemed to be a little bit more comfortable. He's not necessarily been the fastest, but he seems to have been the more composed of the 2 drivers, and that will have a major effect, particularly in race 3, where that tyre wear becomes all important. As we saw last night in race 3, that offset between taking a new set of tyres and not taking a new set of tyres, as exemplified by having a cracking time and Chronic Opal, where it all came down to the second to last corner on the final lap, and Kraken just broke a little bit too late. So that's going to be on a lot of drivers' minds here, and I think a majority of our drivers will be going for a tyre change in the pits in race number 3. But still, we are waiting. I think we might be getting a follow-up start check underway, because a lot of our drivers are either slowing down or just parking the car. and we're just waiting for confirmation from race control. And I should point out that our lead steward for today, in terms of the steward on site hosting the lobby and making sure everything proceeds smoothly, is MDC, who we saw compete in EU Division 1 last night, and subordinate here doing a practice start by looks of things, or at least letting everybody through and being very patient to park up on the inside. Here's the second start checklist. We're doing one more practice 1 lap start check race, and then I think we will be waiting for the qualifying timer to kick off, because this will take us approximately 2.5 minutes, and we have got 5.5 minutes to go before we get underway with qualifying. So as we pan down to the grid this time, some of our drivers are flicking their lights up and down because they've got the old style headlights where they're not perfectly visible all the time. Instead they pop up when you trigger them. Lovely little feature on the Ferrari, I must say. And it will be Not Nats who leads us away again this time. And as all of our drivers get away, everybody has been able to safely pull off the start-finish line once again, so that's great news. Everybody is nice and secure. And we hop over to ZenQ Meister's car here. And breaking down into turn 1, you can see Jenkster getting it all sorts of wrong on the braking and actually giving ZenQ an almighty punt. But for ZenQ, that's actually helped him out massively, simply because it gave him some momentum going through the apex of the corner. ZenQ had already got the car stabilised, so Jenkster didn't send him flying. Although I say that, and ZenQ's made a mistake clearly coming out of turn 3, because he's in the wall on the exit there on the inside as well. A very odd place to park the car or get it put into a barrier. But still, nonetheless, we digress. Spinky Biltong have made a lot of ground actually in this practice start, and that's something we have to watch out for as well. Drivers who will find themselves out of position come the end of the first sector of the race. We saw that last night in EU Division 1, where a number of drivers who were expected to have a huge amount of pace ended up falling very far back just through 1 or 2 slight taps or incidents into turn 1, or alternatively through turns 2 and 3, and that meant they've then ended up having to compete trying to get themselves back into the fight. LCFC Ben going to the inside here. Hummy coming through turn 8, but clipping the wall slightly. And I think as a result, that's actually cost him all his momentum. And indeed it has. He tries to brake as late as possible into 9, but Jenkster's already wary of the fact LCFC Ben has not got the momentum. And in fact, just pulling away. And we can see there that Will Becky going for the around the outside manoeuvre and actually making it work, much like Phil the Vibes was able to the other night, where he was able to use the outsider track to make a lot of very impressive moves. And I think a lot of people picked that up in the chat, just how crazy some of the moves were, particularly his 2-for-1 special late on in race number 2, if I remember correctly. But as Will's coming down towards turn 13 now, we look a little bit further back and we can see in subordinate defending versus Pingo Phone and Fussy Fiery, holding that inside line into turn 13 and doing a very good job of simply parking the car on the apex and not having to worry about either of these two drivers getting the solid shot out the corner. And now charging up towards turn 14, I think it is going to be fair to say then subordinate is going to hold on to 7th place. As the race starts to come to its end, Jenkster getting it all wrong coming out of turn 14. I get the feeling he's probably run wide and hit the wall, but all of our drivers coming across the line now to complete this second race, and what that will mean is we have had another successful start check, 2 out of 2, and congratulations to Not Nats this time for winning the second start check race. So with the second start check race complete, we have got just over 2 minutes to go before we're expecting qualifying to get underway. So start to place your predictions in terms of who will be on pole. One thing to also point out, yesterday evening in the EU Division 1, so our top split within Europe, we saw a pole lap in the 155s as set by Olaf, if I remember correctly. In the low 55s, I believe it was a 155.2 in the end. So if we use that as a template, I reckon EU Division 2's pole time is going to be somewhere in the region of a high 56 to somewhere in the 57s. A high 56 on low fuel and very fresh tyres. All of our cars being equipped with sport soft tyres today. And, well, if anybody's going to be on pole, I'm actually going to tip Aaron Watt to potentially usurp ZenQ Meister for being on pole. But we will wait and find out. Now, if you're in the driver's shoes right now, given this combination, do you go for a limited number of laps? Do you go for fuel burning laps? Or do you decide, you know what, you're going to get as many laps as possible in and not worry about the fuel? Well, if you're not feeling comfortable with this car and the fact, let's talk a little bit about the Ferrari whilst we do so. This is a mid-engine rear-wheel drive car from 1976, 354 horsepower and 1,400 kilograms of mass. Put that together, and what that means is you've got an old school car whereby the rear axle is going to drift as you go through the corners, as Not Nat shows us there, getting it very, very wrong in fact, and well caught that man, he probably plays cricket in his spare time. That was a very nice catch in fact, but the problem with this car in particular is that because it's got a very loose rear end when you're coming through the corners, you have to be very wary of the fact that the car can have a tendency to snap on you. If you've got fuel in the car, that means you've got additional weight poised towards the rear end of the vehicle, and the fact that if you've got 100 litres of fuel, we simulate that as approximately 100 kilograms, so the less fuel you've got in the car, the less additional mass you've got in the rear of the car, and what that means is as you chuck it into the corners, you're going to have a less weight towards the rear to stabilise the car. The trade-off is, of course, that if you've got less fuel in the car, you've got less weight, so on the straights you are going to accelerate more rapidly because you've got less mass to move. So it's all about how comfortable you feel running this car with low fuel. I would say, personally, you probably want to use your first out lap to do a bit of fuel burning. I probably fuel burn for sectors 1 and 2, and then use sector 3 to warm up the tyres and then go on a lap. See where that puts you in terms of the rest of the order, and if you think, okay, I've got myself, say, provisional P3, then you might want to do another fuel burning lap. Alternative, it's put yourself provisional P7, then you might want to actually put in more and more laps because you'll want to bring that lap time down gradually rather than suddenly. But it's all about your relative confidence. As we say hello to Benjeet and Tenured Frog, hope you guys are doing well. And in addition, we didn't say this to Razurian, but we hope you're doing well, Razurian, as well. That's very rude of us not to. And Pingo, hope you've had a great birthday so far, whatever you've been able to get up to. Of course, I don't think all the drivers are going to show you too much preferential treatment here. But we will wait and see, as we've had confirmation from race control that we've got a couple of minutes to go and then we're going to get a change of time of day and we will be kicking off qualifying. I think some of our drivers taking a very quick comfort break before they get underway. I know it, I've been there, you're waiting to get underway with qualifying and then you suddenly need to quickly hop, skip and jump to the bathroom. It's one of those awkward moments where you sort of, do I hop to the bathroom or is it just nerves? It's always good to go to the bathroom because you do not want to be holding it midway through a qualifying session and have that on your mind as well as nailing all your sectors. Sorry to hear that, Pingo. That hasn't been the most interesting days, but of course that is lockdown for you in these interesting times we live in. But hopefully tonight's racing can make up for it and give you some excitement on your birthday. I'm sure it will do. You've been a cracking driver throughout the seasons we've seen thus far. But we will wait and see, of course, whether you come out on top. As we get a change of time of day, so qualifying is go, go, go. We've got 12 minutes. Who's going to be at the top of the field by the end of it? And who's going to surprise us? And who's going to shock us? Let's wait and find out. As we load up the track, it is now 7 o'clock in the morning. It's amazing how we can reverse time or move time forward. I get the feeling that's probably due to global warming, although don't quote me on that. And now everybody's going to be hopping out on circuit, and it is going to be a race to see who's going to be on pole. So as Aaron Watt comes out of the pits in, Aaron Watt will be our first driver who is going to be leading us around. Now, will Watt stay ahead of everybody? That will of course be the question. I get the feeling in Watt's shoes he'll probably want to be the lead driver around here because he's got the pace, so he will be able to pull away from individuals. Hopefully, folks, that the stream's coming through all right on your end. Appreciate that I'm getting some feedback that there might be a little bit of lag on the stream, but hopefully it's nothing too bad. But Watt coming into turn 4 right now and immediately going hammer and tongs through the corners here. I think he's trying to get as much heat in the tyres as possible and literally just tossing it around. And that is, I believe that's meant to be an R and an N. It is very confusing though, I completely agree with you. So as we've got Watt coming through turn 6 then, and let's look further back, and all of our drivers are out on circuit right now. But as all of our drivers are making their way around, you'll notice that they'll start to space out from one another, or we suspect they'll space out from one another as they come up towards the end of Sector 2 and into Sector 3. We do have a rule to say that you cannot use another driver's slipstream to benefit you over the course of qualifying, although I know a number of our drivers would definitely love to do that, much like you see in FIA races and other leagues where slipstream qualifying is permitted. Here it's not permitted, or at least you're not allowed to set yourself up to do it. But of course, if you accidentally trip over the back of another driver and pick up some slipstream on the straight, well, that just happens over the course of your qualifying lap. There's no way around that. But as we are waiting then to get underway with our first flying lap, we are going to be riding on board with Aaron Watt as he comes down towards the final hairpin, and he's going to absolutely plant it out of here, going as wide as possible off the corner, as would be expected, using that exit curve to stabilise the car. And it is go, go, go for Aaron Watt as he goes through turn 14. So let's see how he does the first flying lap of the session. Coming up the final corner then, and nailing that very nicely, going to be coming across that start-finish line at approximately 140 miles an hour here, and I wonder if he's going to be staying in fourth gear as he goes up the hill, or will he upshift? He stays in fourth gear, trying to burn as much as possible and keep the revs high, snapping down at the 150 board there into second gear. Very nice sequence through here in terms of getting off the brakes onto the throttle. That was a very nice turn one by Aaron White, and as he comes through turns 2 and 3, he's going to gradually eke the steering on because he doesn't want the rear end to snap loose, and this is looking very smooth for sector 1. But now the big challenge, turns 4 and 5, coming down hard to second gear here and taking a very conservative inside line, but the rear end of the car snapping at you. He's almost rallying it round turn 4 and into turn 5. Whilst that won't have the greatest amount of momentum, that was very smooth given the fact he was drifting it through those 2 corners. So sector 1 complete, coming in with a 40.0, a nice opening sector. Now coming into turn number 6, a little bit wide of apex here, and that's going to cost him the ability to get on the throttle as early as he'd perhaps like, but still eking that throttle on, and now through 7 up into 8. And what you're going to see here is going to gradually eke over to the right hand side before drifting the car back to the left hand side of the circuit. He'll want the smoothest, the straightest run through 8 because he'll want as much speed as possible before he comes down into turn 9, stamping on the brakes just after the 150 board here, and very heavy on the brakes, and very nicely done as a result. And coming through turn 9 now, using the full width into turn 10 in order to build as much speed as possible. And you'll notice as well that he's got his brake balance a little bit towards the front, but not as heavy to the front as 5 to the front, because we haven't seen the indicators in the bottom left hand corner go completely red under heavy braking. And now going through turn 12, a bit wide of the apex there. I think he got pulled a little bit through the turn 11 apex curve, but still relatively smooth. And coming up into 13, this is the all-important corner for the best possible finish to the lap. As he comes through turn 13, getting it good, but didn't quite extend to the ultimate limits of the corner there, and that may have cost him a 10th, but I don't think it's going to be too much of a cost. And as he comes out of the final corner then to complete his first flying lap, what's it going to be from Aaron Watt? It is going to be, it's definitely going to be in the 1:50s here. It's not going to be a 2 minute, or at least I don't think it's going to be a 2 minutes. It is a 159.0, or is it 158.8? Our timing screens are a bit confused. It's a 158.8, folks. And Zenq already responding with a 158.5. And Pingo Fun coming across the line with a 2 minute flat. Whereas Insubordinate coming across with a 2 minute and what looks to be a 2 minute, a 2 minute point 4. And then we've got Jenkster coming into the pit, so immediately jumping off of those tyres and going for a fresher set. It'll be Tamer now who comes across for his first lap, a 2 minute and 8 second. And then we've got LCFC Ben coming across the line here. Our timing screens are a little bit glitched, folks. Apologies for that. And LCFC Ben is coming across with a 2 minute and 9. And then we have got Spinky Biltong coming out of the final corner. This is looking a relatively fast lap from Spinky here. I think he could just creep into the 1:59s if he gets it right. It is a 2 minute and 1.1. And then we have got Not Nats coming out the final corner, and this is looking very fiery as well. Although it doesn't look as though it's going to be competing for provisional pole, it is going to be a 2 minute point 4. And anybody else coming out that final corner, we've got Will Becky, and then we've got Fussy and Fiery. So we've got Will Becky coming across here, and I get the feeling this is going to be in the region of a 2 minute and 6 because of the fact that, yep, it's a 2:03 according to our timing sheets there. It's a little bit confusing. And Fussy and Fiery being the last of our drivers to set that opening hot lap, and his lap, will it be a fiery one? A 2:02.1? That's not too bad from Fussy and Fiery as a starting lap and one to work from. But Zenq right now, definitely the driver who's up there and the one to beat, it would seem, after one flying lap. Although we do note that some of our drivers have spaced out a bit more, some more fuel burnings going in as all of our drivers are charging through for their second flying lap. And Zenq on a personal best at sector 2 there. And will Aaron Watt be able to respond? We're not seeing any sign that his timing screen's going up purple at the moment, or even blue, so I'm not sure, but we'll wait and find out as Aaron Watt comes out the final corner once again here to complete his lap lap, and it is going to be a 1:57.7. So is ZenQ going to respond to this one? So the fight is on a 57.7 to beat on the second flying lap, and it is a 57. Oh, sorry, that is a 57.9 or 58.0 from ZenQ. So now the shoe is on the other foot, and Aaron Watt taking that provisional pole at this time, as Spinky Bultong is now coming up towards the final hairpin here, and it is definitely a back and forth battle between our two leaders at the moment. And how will Pingo get into the mix? Spinky gets it very wrong under braking into turn 13, and Jenkster has to get out of the way immediately because we have got Insubordinate coming through, who I think is having to essentially hold the car off the circuit. He's put his hazard lights on, so all these drivers tripping over one another here a little bit. In terms of other drivers who are on a flying lap as it currently stands, we've definitely got Will Becky on a flying lap right now, currently sat on a 2:05.9, and that looks to be the accurate lap that he set. As he's coming out to the final hairpin then, how's he going to improve? If he's going to improve here, it's looking like an improvement. You're looking at a 1:50 as you come up to this final corner to be on a lap that's going to be approximately sub 2 minute. And as he comes out the final corner then, I get the feeling this is probably going to be a 2:02 or somewhere in the region of a 2:02 as he makes his way over to the side of the circuit, and it is it's a 2 minute flat, almost a 2 minute and 0.3 as Jenkster comes out of the pits here. So a great improvement from Will Becky, improving by the best part of almost 6 seconds over the course of his second flying lap. As we look further around the field, and at the moment nobody is majorly improving in our leaders battle, as we see Spinky Bultong pulling out the way of Notnats. And Notnats at the moment struggling a little bit, it would seem, to be on that front row with a 2 minute flat, that 2 minute 0.075, but he is on a charge, is Notnats, and I think he's doing quite a bit of fuel burn as he makes his way into turn 6, as he comes into the corner, getting a very nice exit apex there, but not fully extending the width of the circuit, and that's something which is going to cost him a little bit of speed as he makes his way up the hill, albeit it won't be too significant, but every 10th matters in the case of where you qualify in EU Division 2, as we've seen time and time again. And ZenQ into the pits to put on a fresh pair of tyres, no doubt. Notnats going into turn 9, and you can see very smooth on the brakes is Notnats. That's been one of his strengths throughout the season, is his smoothness under braking, as all three of our provisional top three, they fall into the pits to take on a new set of tyres. But you can see Aaron Watt having burned the most fuel out of the three of them, and Notnats improving by 2 tenths at the end of sector 2. So I think this is going to be an improvement. I don't think it's going to be enough to compete for a provisional P3, as Notnats gets it perfect through turn 12. That very nice line, just clipping the exit curb and running a tiny bit wide of it, which you can do with the high ride height of this Ferrari. You do not have to worry about grounding the car. And as he comes out of 13 and heads up towards 14 to complete his lap, let's see what he's able to achieve. Is it going to be an improvement? I reckon this could be a 1:59 for Notnats given the current trend of his lap, but we will see as he comes through. And it is going to be a 1:59.6, a great improvement by Notnats, and only half a second now off of Pingo Phone, who's provisional P3. Spinky Viltong into the pits for a fresh pair of tyres, and Insubordinate right now making his way around the circuit, and I think to go on to a flyer, alternatively burning some fuel out, as Will Becky comes across the line and does not improve on this lap. LCFC Ben at the moment currently sat in P8, provisionally with a 2:02.0, and I think Ben at the moment is just not having the best of times in qualifying, as is Tamir behind him at the moment, currently provisional P10. Jenkster being right at the back, having not really set a lap time so far, as Will gets it very wrong coming out of turn 1 there, and he has to stay out of the way as everybody is starting to come through. That's going to cost him some time, and he's not going to go for the resets. If he resets himself back to the pits, of course he will take on all the fuel he tried to get rid of over the course of the previous laps, with only 2 minutes in this qualifying session to go. And as he makes his way through turn 5, then does Jenkster. We're going to stay with the Welshman, who's getting it all sorts of sideways coming out turn 5 there. I think he's just having a bit of difficulty in nailing those exits through some of these medium speed to low speed corners. He's been very good, has Jenkster, over the course of the 2 rounds so far, but it's just not working out for him as he clips the wall through turn 6, and it's just costing him time hand over fist. We're 2:08.8 so far, but that's well off the chasing pace, I believe, as we can see that Tamir by comparison in P10 on a 2:03.7 so far, and Tamir actually not too far off at the pack in pursuing higher positions across the field from P9 upwards in that provisional P10 slot at the moment. But as we head back to Jenkster, how's he doing at this time? Well, I can tell you folks, Iron Watt firstly is going on to a flying lap, so we will keep an eye on that. But Jenkster coming up towards turns 11 and 12 now as he makes his way up the hill into 11, and he's lifting off that throttle very gradually and stabilising the car as much as possible, just not able to carry too much speed through there. The car getting very twitchy, as we see in the back of your camera shot, somebody going charging into the wall, and I believe that was Fussy and Fiery going charging off into the wall there and saying hello to the inside wall as well on the exit of turn 12, just carrying way too much speed was the Fiery driver there. And now Jenkster coming up towards the final corner. I suspect this may be able to compete with Tamer's time, but I'm not sure how far it's going to move Jenkster up the order as Jenkster goes very wide out of turn 14 as well, almost hitting the tyre barrier as well. This is going to be a 202 or 201.9, which puts him provisional P9. But with the final laps now underway for everybody, it's worth focusing back. Well, I say final laps underway for everybody, the final laps underway for most drivers right now. It's worth noting that Zenq is the lead driver out of our pair of drivers who are competing for that pole position. Zenq only improving by a space of half a tenth on this lap, so he's trying to get into those 157s, and Iron Watt has already set a huge bar here as Zenq makes his way out of turn 12. A very smooth line out there, but is it going to be enough? He's got to do a lot in order to beat Iron Watt over the course of this lap, and I don't think Zenq's done it unless he's going to pull off a very magical final sector as he comes out of 13. It's not a great run out of 13 by comparison what we have seen, but it's still a good run. And now coming through 14, will Zenq have something in the bag, or is it too late, and is it going to go to Iron Watt? And as Zenq comes across the line, it is going to be a 157.9, which is an improvement, but it's not enough, meaning that I think Iron Watt, who's backed it, well, I say he's backed out of it. No, that's just our camera angle there, folks. Iron Watt making his way up towards the final corner. Will Iron Watt improve even further and raise the bar from Zenq and the rest of the drivers? It's looking good from Iron Watt, and it's not going to be an improved lap. So Iron Watt is going to be setting a 157.7 for his qualifying time. Pingo Phone has parked up as well. And looking around the order, we have got Notnats coming across now on a personal best right now as well. So will Notnats be able to knock Pingo Phone down a place, or even perhaps even pip Zenq onto that front row and get ahead of his teammate? As Notnats comes across the line, it is a 159.1, only 11 thousandths of a Pingo Phone. That's how close it was in the battle for P3. But I think everybody has completed their qualifying laps for the most part, apart from the American Insubordinate, who's making his way up towards 11 and 12. So we are going to stay with the German right now, who's improved by a second so far. Gets it very sideways through 12, but just about catches it. So that will cost him some time, but he hasn't lost the lap as he yet as Insubordinate. So this could be an attempt at a 159 as he goes very deep into the fight, and he's got it wrong. That's so unfortunate for Insubordinate. He was doing so well. But nonetheless, it's one of those cases where it just hasn't worked out for him, and as everybody else is coming to the end of their qualifying session, let's just see if there's anybody else on an improvement right now. Will Becky not improving either. So that is your final qualifying order, folks. I believe it is pole position going to Iron Watt on a 157.7, 2.5 tenths ahead of Zenq Meister, who'll be alongside him. Will the Polishman be alongside the Brit? And then in third place, starting off our second row, it'll be the Pingo Phone, the Austrian driver, and he will be joined alongside, separated only by 11 thousandths by the Brit of Notnats. Row number 3 will be started off by Fussy and Fiery, the British driver joined by his fellow countryman in Spinky Biltong, and then the fourth row will be started off by the Welshman of Jenkster 86. Alongside him will be Insubordinate, who will be kicking himself and wondering how high could he have been if he'd been able to finish that lap. It was looking like a definite low 159. And then the fifth row will be started off by the Brit of Will Becky, and alongside him will be LCFC Ben 03. And then our final row will be started off and populated solely by the Egyptian of Tam 2010. That is qualifying completed, folks, and what a cracking qualifying session. And we do have a new pole sitter for the purposes of round number 3, and that is Iron Watt tonight. But of course, this really opens things up now, because we know that we have a different driver on pole. Will everybody try and capitalise on this? Will they all see an opportunity for Zenq to potentially be vulnerable into turn 1? Because it will mean that Zenq is going to start on the outside. Remember, the odd number positions will start on the left-hand side, which is the inside for turn 1 from the driver's perspective, and the even number positions start on the outside or the right-hand side for turn 1. So if you're on that inside, you want to just simply hold that inside defensive line. If you're on the outside, as we saw yesterday, all of the drivers concertinaed over as quickly as possible to get into a straight line going into turn 1, because they knew just how important that inside line was. We're just going to take a moment and take a quick sip of water, and if you haven't already got a liquid refreshment or indeed some nice snacks alongside you, well, now's the time to very quickly grab them. You've probably got a minute before we get race 1 underway, and it will be 5 laps race 1, as will be race 2, and then our endurance race in race number 3 will be 10 laps. As we took a quick breather there, and apologies for being away for a very short period of time. We're just waiting for proceedings to kick off. I think some of our drivers are taking a very quick comfort break before they finally get back into their cars and get out onto the grid. But it is going to be definitely a throw upside down in terms of what's going to happen tonight. I can be sure of that. I think you can all be sure of that. We are not going to be seeing a case of ZenQ running away with this one. Of course, ZenQ is a driver who loves a fight, he loves a good challenge, and he will be looking to get back past Aaron Watt as soon as possible, and then he'll want to run away with it, of course. And we do wonder whether the Austrian of Pingo phone will just simply try and hold on to what is P3 at the start, or will he try and come in like a wrecking ball and make his way up into P1? And I'm probably going to get taken off of Twitch now for singing a part of a song, as race 1 is coming at you right now, folks. We are going to get underway with race 1. We are go any second now as our lead steward decides to kick things off. Here we go then, folks. We've got the timer coming down, so 10 seconds to go, and then we will be transitioning over to the grid. And Z, I'm not dressing up like that. So as we pan down towards the grid then, on your right it's RM Watt, on your left it's ZenQ, behind them Pingo Phone and Notnats. But watch out for Insubordinate, the American starting in P8. What can he do given the fact he's out of position from qualifying? We saw how much pace he had. And it's lights out and away we go, and RM Watt getting a little bit of a bogged down start there, but all of our drivers seemingly caught out a little bit by the delay on the light transfer. But as we went green there, RM Watt drag racing with ZenQ up in towards turn 1. I think ZenQ is not going to have enough to get round the outside into turn 1. He's going to have to think about cutting back as RM Watt goes very deep, and in fact doesn't manage to block ZenQ on the apex there. So ZenQ does get the cut back and jumps up into P1, but all of our drivers making it through turn 1 safe and sound. But now the big question will be, how do they all do going into turn 4? As we can see, Fussy and Fiery all the way up into P4 already, and going for the move on Pingo into turn 4, and going for the move on RM Watt. He's going for a double, but it does cut back to the right now, so I think Fussy and Fiery has prematurely thrown that one in as he holds the outside, and Fussy and Fiery competing with Notnats, and Pingo is right in the mix there and up into P4, Notnats up into P3, and behind them we've already had one major incident as we can see one driver at the rear view camera shot. Insubordinate up to P6 with Will Becky behind him in P7, and then we've got Tamir up into P8, but some drivers out of position. The driver most importantly out of position was Spinky Bilton. We're not sure what happened to Spinky, who's now going to have to chase after the field. 5.5 seconds down on Jenkster in P10, but ZenQ already starting to pull a little bit of a gap on RM Watt as they all come up towards turn 9 for the first time of asking. And as you can see, as they go heavy on the brakes here, everybody settled into position, although Notnats goes very deep on the brakes. I think he missed his braking point a little bit, and Pingo Phone will be aware of that and will now try to capitalise as they drag race up towards 11, but really trying to go for a move up into 11. It's going to be very difficult. It's not a natural overtaking position, and I think Pingo will just want to apply the pressure here rather than go for any drastic moves through 12 as both drivers drift through, and Older second Insubordinate into the wall, but he's caught it. He hasn't spun the car out, but he will have to worry about going defensive versus Will Becky behind, as Notnats has to go defensive versus Fussy and Fiery, and Fussy and Fiery on the outside not able to get anything done, and what that means is he's going to lose some momentum as they drag race up towards 14, but Pingo will have to tuck in once again as they come through the right hander to complete lap 1. Fussy and Fiery on the inside there, so after one lap going a bit wide out the final corner, it is the pole of ZenQ, followed by 1.2 seconds down RM Watt, a further 2 seconds down to Notnats, a second to Fussy and Fiery. There's 2 tenths down to Pingo Phone, and Insubordinate immediately immediately behind, and Will Becky as well. Tamir in P8 right now. Jegster in P9, who we just missed. There's Jegster, and then we've got LCFC Bennett in P10, and last but not least, our drivers right now is Spinky Biltong, as all our drivers come down into turn 1, and it's been a major incident. I think it's the board that's completely missed the corner. We're going to take a look back and find out. As we ride on board here with Insubordinate as he makes his way up the hill in towards turn 1. You can see he had the momentum on Pingo, and I think he just got too adventurous on the brakes here, and he decided to go play sandcastles instead. But meanwhile, Fussy and Fiery, I think, is trying to push for P4 right now as he goes sideways out of turn 5, and Pingo Phone capitalising on that immediately, and Fussy and Fiery just needs to calm it down a little bit, I'd say. He's doing a very good job at the moment competing for the bottom step, sorry, not the bottom steps, the top step of our top 5 outside of the podium, but he's just given into too much rush here, and he's being caught out by it as a result as Pingo Phone back up into P4. Meanwhile, up front we can see that ZQ only 1.1 seconds ahead of Iron Watt right now, as Not Nazi is chasing after them, albeit a way down. Pingo Phone got enough space versus Will Becky, so he doesn't have to worry too much as they come in towards turn 9, and behind them Will Becky being pursued by Fussy and Fiery, and we can see that Jegster is up into P7 through just some very consistent driving and staying out of any trouble, and Tamir the same in P8 right now, and he'll be very pleased with this position if he can bring it home. Spinky in P9 haven't got past Insubordinate after Insubordinate's major error, and we can also see there's battling between LCFC Ben and Insubordinate, with Ben trying to go around the outside at turn 10, and I think Ben's going to have this as they drag race up the hill towards 11, and Ben is going to be on the outside to inside line, which is perfect for him covering into turn 12, but he will have to give Insubordinate the space as they make their way side by side through 12, and that's great respect shown by both drivers, as we can see Spinky going for the move on Tamir into turn 13, and I think he's got it done. But what about Ben? Well, Ben has got it covered off as they come through 13 and make their way out towards turn 14. Meanwhile, up front, ZQ still leading, but only by 9 tenths, the gap having come down by approximately 2 to 3 tenths over the course of this lap, and I think Iron Watt is getting the better run out of the hairpin, and that's why he is closed up as rapidly as he is, as we see ZQ lagged a little bit there, and we'll have to wait to see what exactly is going on, but ZenQ is lagging, so that timing screen may not be 100% accurate, but what is accurate at the moment is the fact that Pingo Phone in P4 has got Will Becky and Fussy and Fiery chasing after him like a mad rash, and well, Will at this point qualifying much further down the order than perhaps expected. Will is a man on a mission. He's trying to put as much pressure on the Austrian as possible as the Brit, as he goes very sideways through turn 4, as does Fussy and Fiery. Both drivers in synchronised drifting here, and as I said yesterday, folks, this isn't a drifting sport, but our drivers are doing a very good job of drifting their cars around the corners as we look back to the exterior camera right now, and you can see that Fussy and Fiery not able to capitalise on the momentum, although I say that, Will get very unsettled through turn 6 upon entry there, and just having to settle the car, and that's costing quite a bit of momentum. Meanwhile, up front, I should point out that ZenQ has not pulled away from Iron Watt. That gap is still at 9 tenths, so I think where ZenQ is strongest is in sector 1, whereas Iron Watt is stronger in sectors 2 and 3, and that's how it's balancing out over the course of a lap. Not naturally the comfortable P3 right now, as Will Becky is still ahead of Fussy and Fiery. Further back, Jegster in a very quiet 7th place right now with no action really happening. Insubordinate has got away from Spinky Biltong and LCFC Ben. I think Spinky has cleared Ben earlier on in the lap. We didn't quite catch that, I was off camera, and Tamir is now back down to P11 with the natural order starting to resume as Tamir gets it very wrong going through turn 9 there, going a bit late on the brakes with too much momentum, I would gather. But coming out the final corner then to complete what is a lap number 3, it's still ZenQ ahead, and ZenQ getting a much better run out of the hairpin there by comparison, as we see Pingo go very wide out of the hairpin there, and Fussy and Fiery, hold on a second, what on earth has happened to Will Becky? He's dropped all the way down to P7. I would guess he's probably got it wrong at turn 12. He was into the wall at turn 12. He went way too deep. What on earth has happened to Will there? We caught the rear end of that, and he was in the wall sideways at the exit of 12 before he was going into the outer wall. So Will just getting it all sorts of wrong by the looks of things. So there may have been some contact, although I think that Jegster was too far back for there to be contact. So Will having a disastrous moment, and I'm sure that'll be cleared up after the race if there was any contact. But Will dropping back, and that means Pingo Phone and Fussy and Fiery can now focus on just holding on to their top 5 positions, IP4 and P5 respectively, as the field has opened up quite significantly, and Will Becky is doing his utmost here to chase back after Jegster and get back into that top 5 by the end of this race. He'll know that a P5 is there if he can catch up with the drivers, and Jegster getting it very wrong out of 4 there, getting a little bit too snappy at the rear end and missing turn 5 and going wide and into the wall, and Jegster has now got to turn that car around as it's all out of position, and that means that a number of drivers will get a promotion here. Insubordinate and Spinky in particular will get promoted, and how the tables have turned. And meanwhile, up front it is 1.5 seconds between ZenQ and RM Watt. No change really on the gap has expanded by about half a second overall so far. Not that still in P3 and a very comfortable P3, and Pingo Phone gradually being reeled in right now by Fussy and Fiery. The gap between these two now down to a second as we see Pingo go very deep into turn 9, and in fact so deep that gap has just been halved by Fussy and Fiery, and Fussy and Fiery all over the back of Pingo right now. The Brit making the attack on the Austrian, and I think he might try and go for it given the fact that we've got 1 and a bit laps to go here as they come out of 12. If Fussy can nail this, I think he'll go for the move as they both go sideways and both drivers catching it very well. Pingo going much deeper than Fussy, but both of them conserve their momentum, but Fussy going for the move on the inside with 1 more lap to go after this one, and you can see that Pingo tried turning, he expected to go for the cutback there, but Fussy was there on the apex in response as we have got a driver sideways coming out of 12 from what I'm hearing at race control, and it is Jenkster after doing all that work to get up into P6 down to P10. What happened to Jenkster? So coming out of 10 then, natural racing line here, and I get the feeling perhaps he just simply overstepped it in terms of getting the car stabilised at turn 11 before going into 12. Cuts a lot of 11 in fact and carried way too much momentum, and does he just simply go too deep as a result? Yep, goes too deep and the rear end just comes out on him. He oversteered round, and that's what happened to Jenkster. That was a very unfortunate incident as we're on to that final lap, and going into turn 5 round now is our race leader of ZenQ, 2.5 seconds ahead of RM1. Behind them, Not Nat still holding on to P3. Fussy and Fiery has still held on to that position versus Pingo Phone, although these two drivers are going to go down to the wire. And speaking of going down to the wire, Pingo Phone go for the move on the inside into turn 5. Looking for an opportunity there, but it wasn't to be found as Fussy and Fiery shut the door hard on him. And in the rear view camera shot, you'll see Will Becky 4.5 seconds back, trying to catch up, but I think it's an insurmountable gap unless these two take one another out. But it's getting so close between the two of them right now as they're coming up through turn 7. And as they're going to be going up the hill here, you do have to wonder, where will Pingo Phone go for it? Knowing the fact that Fussy and Fiery does seem to have been the more consistent driver on average into these corners, so Pingo needs to strike somewhere where Fussy and Fiery cannot come back, and I think he'll need to bide his time and go for it to that final hairpin, because there's the drag race to the line and you don't really win it. And Fussy and Fiery gets it too late on the brakes and into the wall, meaning Pingo Phone moves up to P4 and Fussy and Fiery has to quickly get it recovered here as we see Will Becky is not able to capitalise on it, and Fussy and Fiery missing his braking point there and just simply going out of the corner and into the wall, and Pingo Phone will say thank you very much, I'll take my P4 back. LCFC bed in P9 and Jenkster in P10 right now. All the field cleared quite far away, but it's this man who, having started P2, has made his way back up onto the top step after race number 1. It is the Polish driver ZenQ who will pick up win number 1 tonight in race 1 as he comes across the line, and behind him 3.1 seconds down is the Brit of RM Watt, having put in a good performance but wasn't able to turn it into a win in race 1, but we'll see in the later races. And our podium will be rounded out by Not Nats GT, the British driver putting in a great performance. Fourth place goes to Pingo Phone after a very close battle, and Will Becky is going to pick up P5 after Fussy and Fiery must have made another error somewhere, and it's going to be insubordinate in P7. He'll be pleased with that given everything that's happened so far. And then Spinky Biltong coming across the line, probably hoping for a better result in future races here, and it'll be P9 for LCFC Ben 03 as he makes his way across the line here, quite a way back, 7.5 seconds behind him. Our top 10 will be rounded out by the Welshman of Jenkster 86 as he comes across, and then last but not least of our drivers, it is Tamer 2010, the Egyptian driver, having had a very consistent race for the most part, by some errors in the mid part of the race which saw him drop down the order. It's Tamer who completes our race order for race number 1. Congratulations to all of our drivers as always, but most importantly, congratulations to our race winner, ZenQ from Poland. Well, goodness me, that's already one race completed, and already I get the feeling that I'm going to need my stunt double in here for the other two races, because, well, these guys do not know how to keep the action calm. They're fast, they're crazy, and it's as intense as all heck. But as we come over to the race results then, subject to any stewards' inquiries, it is ZenQ who picks up the win for race 1, ahead of RN1 and Not Nats GT rounding out the other steps of the podium. Pingo Phone picking up P4. He'll be very pleased with that, I'm sure, given the fortunes that he had with Will Becky and Fussy and Fiery. And our top 5 was rounded out by Will Becky, who has messaged me to let me know to say there was no contact when that incident occurred, where we thought he might have had some contact with another driver. No, he just simply got it wrong himself. But still, a great recovery drive from Will to get to that P5. And as for fastest lap, it went to ZenQ Meister on lap 5 for 158.1. Well, goodness me, and as we wait for race 2 to get underway right now, the things to consider, or things that we've learned from race number 1, well, firstly, ZenQ does seem to be a bit more settled in the race compared to qualifying. He seems to be finding that pace that wasn't perhaps there in the qualifying session. We've also seen that Aaron Watt is keeping him honest in the fact that he's still there in the background, but he perhaps hasn't got as much pace to unleash at this point in the race conditions. And also the fact that the battle for P3, well, depending on how things play out on the opening sector of lap 1, it would seem that Not Nats is a little bit of a sleeping dog. Oh, that's probably not the saying, that's the incorrect saying there. But he's a little bit of a sleeper in the fact that he is able to pull off some rather nice laps, and that's giving him the space to stay in P3 and simply say goodbye to everybody else chasing him. As we move on to 10 past 1 in the afternoon, and I get the feeling that's probably also global warming causing that one. As we hop back to the circuit very shortly. And all of our drivers starting to make their way back out onto the circuit in preparation for race number 2. Everybody is getting pretty hyped down the paddock at the moment for the competition for, say, second place in the Drivers' Championship, and also for the top 5 in the Drivers' Championship, because it could all be mixed up by the end of tonight, with drivers already dropping some results. Particularly with the fact that we have seen Aaron Watt finish P2 in the battle with Not Nats in the P2 competition. The drivers, Not Nats, will want to finish ahead of Aaron Watt and make sure he doesn't drop any results now. He'll need to continue to finish behind Aaron Watt, at least for the next race. If not, he'll want to beat him over the course of race 3 as we get underway with race number 2. It's coming right at you, folks. So as we pan down to the grid once again, it's this time ZenQ on the right and Aaron Watt on the left for our front runners. Behind them, Not Nats and Pingo Phone. But watch out for the guys on the third row, Will Becky and Fussy and Fiery, 2 very fast drivers who will be looking to try and sandwich their way in amongst our top runners here. They'll know that they've got the performance to get on that third step of the podium. And it's lights out and away we go, and all of our drivers getting a much cleaner start compared to others this time, although Will Becky getting the launch of the century there. As you can see, Will already up into P4 and trying to drag race his way past Not Nats and Aaron Watt up into P2, but he hasn't got the slipstream, and as a result that means he's dropping down. But he's immediately going into the inside for turn 1, and I think Will here is going for a move on Not Nats, and he's trying to force it through. And as they all come through the corner here, it's a little bit more like touring car rather than Formula 1 right now, as they all come through turn 1 relatively safe and sound. But Will up into P3, and that's going to shake things up even more as we see ZenQ lagging a little bit. I thought he was going flying off then, and Not Nats is going to immediately find a comeback as Fussy and Fire and Insubordinate both go wide, and Tamer goes wide as well. They're all drifting wide at turn 4, and what that means is it brings other drivers right up into the mix. Pingo Phone down to P7, and Insubordinate, the American driver representing Germany today, all the way up into P5, and drag racing LCFC Ben up into 6. Well, it looks as though Ben has managed to hold on, although I say that Insubordinate trying to drift to the inside, and Ben going very deep as a result of carrying too much speed and understeering into the corner and then oversteering out of it. It looks as though the drag race continues as they all make their way up the hill here. And who's it going to be out of these two going into turn 9? Well, I think it's going to be Insubordinate, who's just going to have the legs on Ben as they come up into the braking zone here. And of course, Pingo Phone behind is getting very vicious, and Ben goes to the move from very far back, and you can see it's worked out because it's caught Insubordinate by surprise as Fussy and Fiery goes very deep out the corner, and there's contact between Fussy and Fiery and Pingo. I think Pingo's right-hand driver driver's door right now is absolutely, right-hand passenger door is absolutely clattered right now from Fussy and Fiery coming into that, but it's not coming down between these guys at all, and any one of them could be up for P5 right now, as we see Ben holding on for dear life in battling with Pingo Phone, and Insubordinate, who's got it very wrong. Insubordinate, he's dropped 2 places as Pingo Phone goes for the move in turn 13, and now it's going to be a drag race out towards the start-finish line to move on to the next lap. But meanwhile, up front, it is ZenQ after lap 1, who is ahead by 8/10 of Oren Watt. Then behind, 2.3 seconds behind, it's Will Becky holding off Notnats for the time being after a cracking start for Will Becky. LCFC Ben drag racing with Pingo Phone, and it's going to be Pingo who moves up into P5, but Fussy and Fiery and Ben also in the mix here as they go 3 wide up the hill into turn 1. We'll come back to the rest of the drivers in a minute, folks, and it is going to be Pingo Phone who holds the inside, but he's carried way too much momentum, and Fussy and Fiery immediately comes back as Insubordinate gets the perfect line through turn 1, taking Ben already, and Speaky Biltong's trying to follow through, and that means that Fussy and Fiery has pulled away a little bit, and Pingo now has to go defensive versus Insubordinate. So these 5 drivers all trading places non-stop, as we see behind them Ben and Speaky Biltong in P8 and P9, and we've got Jenkster in P10, and then Tamir in P11, the last of our runners at this point in time. ZenQ still holding on by a second versus Oren Watt, as Notnats has got past Will Becky once again now, and he's back up into P3 now. I suspect we didn't see that on camera, but that has most likely happened somewhere around the region of turn 3 or turn 4. But we're going to take a look back at Will Becky's absolutely mesmerising start. So you'll see Will here, he just has so much momentum coming into turn 1, and he decides, you know what, if Notnats is going to leave the door open, I'll put the car there, and Notnats respected it as a result, and as they came through turns 2 and 3, that's what enabled Will to gather so much momentum versus Notnats. He just simply had the ultimate launch, did Will. But Notnats now started to pull away a little bit. 7/10 is the gap between these two. As further back we can see Fussy and Fiery pulling away as Insubordinate has now got up into P6 and Pingo Phone down to P7. And let's just find out whether there has been any change in turn 9. Insubordinate already got the move done before turn 9, so I get the feeling that as a result Pingo Phone's probably made a mistake somewhere, or the move's been forced through, and Pingo Phone actually going very deep into turn 9, hence why he's fallen back so much. But we see, hold on a second, Fussy and Fiery down into P7. Whilst we're looking at one replay, something else has happened, and now we've got to cast the replay back once again. But we will very shortly. Let's focus on what's happening right now, folks, as we see Insubordinate up into P5. But for how long before that changes again, it's anybody's guess. None of these drivers want to settle for position as they all drift sideways through turn 14. Now that's one hell of a photo if one of our cameramen caught that. And Pingo Phone charging after Insubordinate. And we can see Fussy and Fiery now to look towards his rear view mirror as Speaky Biltong tries to go to the outside initially, going up into turn 1, but will he try and cut it back, or will he try and throw the dummy going into turn 1? He does neither, as Fussy and Fiery goes very deep on the brakes, and Pingo Phone gets a very smooth line through turn 1, and Insubordinate is being closed down. Meanwhile, up front, we can see that ZenQ is only 1 second ahead of Oren Watt. Still, the gap not opening up between the two of them. And behind them, it's Notnats who's gradually pulling away from Will Becky. Although I say that, the gap is only 9/10, so we've got very similar gaps between our two leaders and our battlers for P3, as Pingo Phone has moved up to P5 and Insubordinate has moved down the order to P6. Now, where has that happened? Well, it looks as though it's happened in turn 5, but let's take a look and find out what exactly happened. So Pingo Phone was in P6 going into turn 4, and I think Insubordinate has just gone very deep as a result in one of these two corners in the chicane, and it is the second of the two where he's just gone deep as Insubordinate, and he's drifted the car wide, and Pingo Phone carried the momentum. Meanwhile, Fussy and Fiery went very sideways out of turn 5 and just about caught it before Speaky Biltong was able to capitalise. So that's why it's all changing up there, and LCFC Ben has dropped out of the fight for P5 right now, finding himself 2.5 seconds down the road from Speaky Biltong in P9. Jenkster coming up in towards turn number 9 as well, P10 right now, and Tamir making his way up the hill in P11. But further up front, meanwhile, it is ZenQ still leading, but Oren Watt is starting to try and close that gap down a little bit. It hasn't really changed too much, and Notnats has pulled out more of a gap on Will Becky. But in that battle for P5, I think we're going to see a little bit of a more settled order right now, as Pingo Phone has opened up that gap to Insubordinate by 1.5 seconds. Although the question is, will Pingo Phone be able to maintain that gap and build it even further? We have seen that Pingo has been subject to a couple of mistakes over the course of laps, and that has cost him the time he's needed when he's been able to break away. And we can see, meanwhile, behind, Fussy and Fiery getting all sorts of fiery through 14 and chasing after Insubordinate as much as possible and trying to stay right in that slipstream zone. And you can see Insubordinate weaving on the start-finish straight, trying to cut as much of that toe as possible. You get one free weave, of course, according to the FIA rule book, which will chuck at him if he doesn't do too many, or if he does too many more weaves. And Fussy and Fiery, whoa, the second, and then Insubordinate going off there into the wall. I think Insubordinate just carried too much momentum, and now he's got to park it up and wait. What on earth happened to Insubordinate there? So coming up the hill, does he just miss his braking point completely? It looks as though he broke way too deep into the corner. In fact, yet missed his braking point, and he's off into the gravel, and that spun him right out. That's very unfortunate for the American driver, who's now all the way down to P10 and chasing after Jenkster, trying to get back up the order. But meanwhile, up front, it's good that we transition back because ZenQ, for whatever reason, is in a drag race with Iron Watt up the hill right now through 9. Sorry, coming up into 9, and it looks as though Iron Watt is starting to build more and more momentum on the Polish driver. Is the Brit as they go into turn 9, and Watt doesn't go for the move here, but you can see he's sniffing the move as much as possible. He's trying to put as much pressure on the Polish driver as they come down the hill from 10 and up into 11 now. And who's going to be on top between these two? I think it's going to come down to the final lap. I don't think ZenQ's clear yet, and it's just one mistake which will separate these two from the win, I reckon, at the moment, because ZenQ has been about a second faster overall in terms of the race distance, but it has not been a case that Iron Watt's been giving him any ability to let up, and that pressure could be enough just to cause ZenQ to make one minor mistake. So it's so close between the two of them right now, as Notnats is still a second ahead of Will Becky, and I think Will right now is doing everything he can to catch Notnats, but just doesn't quite have enough in the tank, as Fussy and Fiery is starting to lead in P6. Well, I say he's leading, and then Spinky and Fussy and Fiery both literally echo one lower, but Spinky gets it a little bit better. But meanwhile, up front, as they go on to the final lap, it's ZenQ who's leading, and I definitely think that Iron Watt is struggling with the final hairpin because the gap is opening up so much between the two of them when they come down towards turn 1, almost by 1.1 seconds now, that gap. So it's opened up by in the region of about 8 tenths, as we see in the rear view camera shot there. Will Becky absolutely charging down in towards turn 1 there, and I think that was too close for comfort for Notnats in his rear view mirror, as Pingo Phone has a very peaceful P5 to deal with now, and Spinky Biltong up into P6 after Fussy and Fiery got it wrong coming out of turn 13, but still one lap to go between those two. As we can see in the battle for P3, Notnats is being hounded by Will Becky, and Will Becky going for the cutback, but the car saying no and getting all sorts out of shape as he comes out of 5, and I think that's going to give Notnats enough breathing room here, as we see Spinky by comparison a good distance ahead of Fussy and Fiery right now. And I think if Spinky doesn't get anything wrong, Fussy and Fiery has got a lot of legwork to do over the course of the next two sectors, and it's going to be quite the effort. It's going to be a Herculean one, as Insubordinate down in P9. He's cleared Jenkster, but he's still got a long way to go to pick up a result, and I don't think it's going to be happening now. But as we look back towards the battle for P3, we can see that Notnats versus Will Becky. Notnats is just pulling away once again, and I think that's the difference. It's just the refinement on the lap, because Will is very fast, and there's contact between the two of them, which sends Notnats out into the water. Will Becky waits, but Notnats has spun, and this means Pingo Phone's going to come out and pick up P3, with the fact that Will Becky's politely waited, of course, but now that Notnats has got to get the car recovered, he will have to give the place back. But meanwhile, up front, it's ZenQ Meister who's holding on by approximately 1.3 seconds from Iron Watt, and I do not think he is going to change over the rest of this, so ZenQ will be bringing it home. It's going to be 2 out of 2 for the Polish drivers. They come towards the final corner, and there's major contact further back. We will find out what happened very shortly, folks, but it will be ZenQ who is your race winner for race number 2, 1.3 seconds ahead of Iron Watt, the British driver, giving it all, but it wasn't enough. And then it's going to be a surprise third place for the Austrian driver, who after a very difficult start to this race, finding himself in a 5-way battle for P5, is coming home in a surprise P3. Well, who would have thought of it, ladies and gentlemen? Pingo Phone rounded off our podium for this one. Then it's going to be Notnats ahead of Will Becky in P4 by the smallest of margins after the contact, and Fussy and Fiery missing out in P6 by a small margin. LCFC Ben is going to be finishing P7 ahead of Spinky Biltong. I think Spinky got it very wrong at turn 12, and we're not going to get the chance to look back at that, I don't think, as Insubordinate is coming up towards the finish line now. Coming up towards turn 14 and just throwing it through the corner, and Insubordinate's going to be kicking himself once again because it was a costly error at turn 1 this time, which cost him the chance of being in that top 5, but still he'll bounce back one more time for the finale of tonight and the finale of EU Division 2's season 37, as Jenkster completes our top 10, and then it is 12.5 seconds back to Tamer, who's going to be rounded off our field in P11 one more time. As he comes across the line, then he's going to be bringing the car home for his team. And congratulations to all of our drivers once more, but most importantly, congratulations to our race winner, ZenQ, making it 2 out of 2 tonight. Well, that was a phenomenal second race, and we're just going to quickly save the replay, of course, in case anything goes wrong. But after those 5 laps, the classification subject to any steward's decision, of course, race winner ZenQ once again making it 2 out of 2 by 1.337 seconds. So that is a elite finish ahead of Aaron Watt. And then the final step of the podium going to Pingo Phone, who put in a colossal effort and was there to inherit the position when there was the incident between Notnats and Will Becky. Notnats finishing P4 and Will Becky being very respectful throughout. Great sportsmanship shown, finishing P5 in the end. Only a small distance ahead of Fussy and Fiery. The fastest lap in that race was on the final lap once again, a 1:58.009, so a tenth faster than the previous fastest lap we saw as set by our race winner, ZenQ. And now we've got one more race to go. But what an absolute cracker of a race, and all our drivers will now be looking to have a very quick comfort break before they get back onto the circuit for the finale. 10 laps it will be. It is the endurance race with the mandatory pit stop, and who knows what's going to happen by the end of it. But Notnats in this one having a result which he will not have wanted, because what it means now is he will need, I think, he will need to finish ahead of Aaron Watt in order to beat Aaron Watt to P2 in the Drivers' Championship. It was going to be very close between them, and I can confirm, folks, that as it currently stands, Notnats is on 110 points, Aaron Watt is on 106 points. So it's 4 points between the two of them. Of course, this is the bonus points round. So what it will mean, I won't be able to do all the different permutations, but Notnats will need to finish, he'll need to finish immediately behind Aaron Watt in order to secure his second place in the Drivers' Championship. As we head back to the circuit, and all of our drivers are getting warmed up now for the final race of the evening. Whilst we're waiting, I'm going to take a very quick breather, and I do recommend, if you haven't got a drink or any snacks available right now, it's a good time to do so. If you need a quick toilet break, you've probably got the best part of a minute to 1.5 minutes before we get underway with race 3. That move by Will Becky into turn 1 in race 2 was a phenomenal move in getting in the way of Notnats and essentially flipping the tables upside down. And I think Will has really mastered the start with regards to this Ferrari compared to everybody else. He just had so much momentum off the line, and if it weren't for the fact that the 3 drivers ahead of him tried to form into a conga line, he may have even found himself battling with Aaron Watt going into turn 1. Following Aaron Watt right now as he makes his way around the circuit, and you get to hear the lovely tones of the Ferrari's engine. Well, I say that, and then Aaron Watt decides to plaster it into the wall at the final hairpin. Good way of getting the car stopped though, to go again on the straight. I'm glad to hear you're enjoying the stream, MDC, being able to relax. We've got a lot of fans for the COC Ferraris today in the chat, I can see. We say hello to Martin Brewer, also Yaya, and we're getting race 3 underway, folks. We're going to have to forget all those hellos right now. Race 3 coming right at you. We go one last time in EU Division 2, Season 37. So as we come down to the grid then, on your right it is ZenQ, on your left Watt, behind them Pingophone and Notnats. But watch out for Will Becky in P5 starting off our third row. He'll have a lot of pace, and also Insubordinate in P9. What can he do? 9, he's out of position and he just needs to nail the laps. Lights out and away we go, and all of our drivers are getting a relatively good start, but once again Will going for the best of the starts there, as you can see as they come up the hill. But this time it's a much more restrained order coming up in towards the hill for turn 1, and in fact everybody's settling down very quickly into an order in the top 3, but behind Will having to go very defensive as he makes his way up into P4. But there is a lot of contact between the drivers this time around, and ZenQ and Watt getting it stabilised very quickly, but Pingophone holding on to P3 for the time being. But Ben, where on earth has Ben come from? He's up into P4. Well, that is an absolutely musical jump. We're going to have to find out very shortly, folks, as ZenQ right now making his way through turn 4, and Watt going very deep, and in fact having to go defensive into 5 versus Pingophone, as you can see behind Fussy and Fiery coming through on LCFC. Ben and Will Becky down in P6 right now, but where on earth did Ben come from? He just appeared out of nowhere, and now he's up into P5, and I think he's going to lose some places shortly, but still that is a huge gain on the start as they all make their way through turn 6, and Insubordinate right now being chased very heavily by Notnats, and Notnats all the way down in P8. Notnats having the worst of the starts. In fact, it's going from good to bad to worse as Spinky is chasing after him, and Notnats goes into the wall on exit of 7. As they come up the hill then, you can see that Spinky overtaking a 2-for-1 special here as they all come into their pin, and there's contact to a degree as well. ZenQ's lagging quite a bit. Watt having to worry about Pingophone and the lagging pole in front of him, and then Fussy and Fiery in P4 right now and pulling away a little bit from Will Becky, who's made the move on LCFC Ben. Now let's find out what on earth happened. Well, we won't be able to find out because our replay camera's glitched, I think, folks. Nope, there we go. So Ben, let's ride on board with Ben as he makes his way up his hill. So he had a really good start, and well, nothing really happens for the first part, so it wasn't as though he made a lot of places from P7 by just simply getting the best of the launches, but surely he's going to have to go really tight to the inside into the first corner then, and he does. He just simply surprised everyone and nailed it on the brakes. What a move from Ben, just simply throwing it down there where there was the space to do so. So after one lap, it is ZenQ Meister 1 second ahead of Watt, Pingophone in P3 of half a second back, then Fussy and Fire in P4 ahead of Will Becky, Ben in P6, Insubordinate in P7, Spinky Bulldog in P8, Jinxter in P9, then we've got Terror in P10, and Notnats in a very dismal P11 right now, but with 9 laps to go and a lot of strategy involved in this. Notnats is going to have to pull a blinder here of strategy, and if I was in issues right now, I would pit at the end of the next lap as Watt and Pingophone are coming to blows at turn 3 and coming up into 4 now. Pingo's going to go for the move to the inside, they will pit him on the outside for turn 5 as Fussy and Fiery drifts his way through the corner and tries to close as much as possible, and Watt gets the cut back to the inside at the end of the chicane sequence, and now back up into P2, but this is enabling ZenQ to pull away. This is not what Watt will have wanted, albeit Watt knows that he just needs to finish 2 places or 1 place ahead of Notnats in order to secure P2 of the drivers, but he will not want to be caught in a scrap for P2 versus 2 other drivers who are getting closer and closer and breathing down his neck, arm over fist, lap on lap. As you can see that Pingophone has to look towards his rearview mirror because he's got Fussy and Fiery who's trying to make a fuss of getting past him up into P3. So it is ever closer between these drivers as they come up in towards turn 9, and Fussy and Fiery right now just simply tucking in there and not going for anything adventurous at this point in time. I think realising there's a lot more to this race than a couple of laps this time around, as we can see Will Becky in a rather comfortable P5 being chased by Insubordinate, but the gap is 1.4 seconds through turn 10. Behind them, Insubordinate and Spinky going toe-to-toe still, as we can see Spinky chasing after the American driver is the Brit as they make their way through turn 12 for the second time of asking, and then Jinxter in P8 right now and Ben in P9. Well, Notnats, I can tell you, is already... Hold on a second, I'm going to come back to a second. Insubordinate into the wall. What on earth has happened to him as he comes up the hill then? Does he just simply miss his braking point, or is it a repeat of last time he's just carried too much momentum and then gone sideways out of 12 into the wall? I think it's on way too much momentum, and that car is going into that wall, and he's just clattered the walls and now is to get it restored, but he's used the exit wall there to try and stabilise it, and then it's snapped on him. That's so unfortunate for the American, who now drops all the way down the order to P10, and Notnats can begin his recovery drive, and already drivers coming into the pits. Ben is into the pits after 2 laps, so he's the first of our drivers to flinch, and this could be a little bit of a strategic masterclass from Ben if he's able to be consistent for the rest of the race. But right now in that battle for P2, Aaron Watt is still holding off Pingo, Phone and Fussy and Fiery, but it's not as though he's put it away anytime soon, but ZenQ is definitely put it away. The gap now being at 3.5 seconds almost, but Pingo still holding on to P3 and chasing like mad after Aaron Watt. But he does have to be worried about the fact the British driver of Fussy and Fiery behind him has been showing so much pace in these races by comparison with qualifying. He's all over the back of Pingo after time. And well, another question we've got to think about here is Aaron Watt potentially looking to save his tyres right now and not take on a new set of tyres in the pits? And is that why he's driving a little bit slower than perhaps he has been over the previous couple of races? It's all to be considered, because not taking on new tyres in the pits means you are released significantly earlier by approximately 4 seconds by comparison if you take that tyre change, as we can see that Will Becky is still holding off Spinky Biltong, but that gap is closing between the two, and Spinky going for the move, and it's a little bit too late on the brakes for Spinky as he goes very deep. He does catch it, but we'll be saying, well, thanks Spinky for just going through and coming back out the other side. Meanwhile, in the battle for P2, Pingo getting ever closer to the Brit ahead of him, Aaron Watt, and I think Watt here is having to drive more and more defensively lap on lap, and this is not what he have wanted as Pingo looks to the move into turn 13, but Aaron Watt was closing the door there, and Pingo is all over the back of Aaron Watt, but that's enabling Fussy and Fiery to come up here. So that means that Fussy and Fiery now is up into P3, and the pursuit continues. As you can see, they come through turn 14 right now, and Aaron Watt has got a fellow countryman to deal with right now instead of an Austrian, but still it's the same premise. A lot of fast drivers as Pingo comes into the pits from P4, and will he go for a tyre change here? That will be the big question as they're all making their way out of the final corner. Will quite a bit ahead of Fussy and Fiery, not Fussy and Fiery, Spinky Biltong right now by 1.1 seconds. Well, I can report, folks, as we're waiting to find out from Pingo, that Notnats is up into P7 and continuing that recovery drive, as we see that Pingo phone is going for a tyre change. So that is on the board. What about further back? Did Ben go for a tyre change? He did indeed go for a tyre change. So all of our drivers pitted and taking on fresh tyres right now as we look around the field, and we see 2 people pit thus far, and we'll wait to see if anybody else is going to pit in due course. As Fussy and Fiery gets it wrong through turn 5, and that is going to give Aaron Watt a bit of peace. And also what that will mean is when Fussy and Fiery comes into the pits right now, he will fall behind Pingo, assuming Pingo doesn't make any mistakes. And of course Fussy and Fiery will be wary of that and be wondering how he can counter that off. I.e., does he take on tyres? Does he not take on tyres? Does he put in absolute qualifying laps right now? It's all going to be there for him to decide upon. Meanwhile, further back in the battle for P4, which is effectively P5 once all the pit stops clear up, we believe so far. Will Becky holding off Spinky Biltong, but again, Spinky coming back at Will every so often here, and it's as if in the first sector in particular, Spinky has just got a bit of a pace advantage that enables him to get back into the slipstream of Will. But of course, Spinky is so far back right now. If he was to go for a move from this distance, he would be so compliant on Will to let him make that move. Will could literally just take the corner naturally and not expect the Ferrari behind him to come charging through. And I think that's what Will's expecting right now. He knows Spinky will go for those daring moves, but if he can just keep the gap out wide enough, it will put pressure on Spinky to close it before he can go for a move. Notnats in P6 right now and gradually closed up towards the leaders, lap after lap, but it's a very gradual gain here, so we'll wait and see how it plays out. And Jigster in P7, the Welshman doing very well right now just to keep it consistent on the road as he makes his way through 12. Lovely camera view there of the Welshman as he makes his way through the very difficult corner, and we can see Pingo already getting into a bit of difficulty here, tripping over the fact he's got the American of Insubordinate ahead of him as Fussy and Fiery comes into the pits from P3. Now this is going to be to counter Pingo phone, of which we are sure, and Pingo having difficulty with Insubordinate, who's grinding against the wall there in 13, and Pingo was able to go around the outside. That was a very brave move from Pingo there to go around the outside, and of course we'll wait and see what this means in terms of Pingo versus Fussy and Fiery, but he will have lost a lot of time in battling with Insubordinate, and he won't have wanted that. And as he comes across the start finish line to complete lap 4 and move on to 5, it is Fussy and Fiery who comes out ahead of Pingo, and Fussy and Fiery went for a fresh set of tyres as well, so Pingo has lost out massively versus Fussy and Fiery, and he will be absolutely cursing that it hasn't worked out on the strategy as we see Spinky Biltong. Hold on a second, what on earth has happened here between Spinky and Will? Because Will into the wall, what on earth has happened to Will? So coming out of turn 3, there was nothing major happening, and then going into 4, has Will just missed his braking point? It looks as though he has, and he's just gone way too deep, gone out onto the gravel, and the car has said no, and that's why Will has dropped down the order. That is a disaster for Will, who now finds himself in a battle with Notnats, but he's out of position, of course, although to be fair, Notnats hasn't pitted either yet, so Will is actually battling for position right now, rather than battling over strategy, but that means Spinky Biltong is up into P3, and what if everything that's happened right now? Spinky, of course, yet to pit as we understand it. Spinky will find himself coming out potentially in a really nice position later on this race, but the race leaders right now, ZenQ in particular, are just running away with this. Of course, the thing from Aaron Watt's perspective is that he does have that 4-second gap behind ZenQ right now, so he could afford to potentially go for a gamble and not take on a fresh set of tyres and come out the pits close to ZenQ, if not slightly ahead of him. But we'll wait and see it, of course, if he can maintain that gap. But Notnats has finally got past Will, and I think that's happened in the uphill as ZenQ comes into the pits. So it's a drag race coming out of turn 10 and up into 11, and Notnats just simply had the momentum coming out the corner. So Notnats had the momentum and got it done. As we see Will into the wall again. Oh no, not for the British driver. 2 times on 1 lap. That is a disaster as Aaron Watt is also into the pits. And let's take a look at what happened to Will here. And I think he's just simply gone a bit wide, and the car's decided to go into the wall. That is so unfortunate for Will, as we see in the race leader right now. We've got a new race leader, folks. I don't think it's going to be for too long, but you've got Spinky Biltong, who's leading a lap of the race, 9.4 seconds ahead of Notnats, who's the closest driver on circuit in competing in terms of lap time, and Notnats is ahead of ZenQ. But of course, Notnats has not pitted yet, but this is going to be an irritation for ZenQ, as we see Jenkster and Will Becky also into the pits. Will having to go into the pits after everything going wrong on lap number 5, of course, but Notnats right now could be holding up ZenQ, it'd be argued, and that is enabling Aaron Watt to potentially close up the gap, as we see Aaron Watt has gone for a fresh set of tyres, as has ZenQ, but I think ZenQ has got enough pace in the bank not to worry too much about Aaron Watt behind him right now. I think Aaron Watt is having to drive the wheels off the car to close up, and it's just not happening. Fussy and Fiery in P5 right now after everything is chopped and changed, and Pingo Phone in P6. Of course, these guys haven't pitted, so Fussy and Fiery is chasing after Aaron Watt here, and our real race order after the pit stops, we believe, ladies and gentlemen, is ZenQ is technically leading strategically on track, but Spinky Biltong and Notnats have the positional advantage right now, and that's going to be playing against ZenQ in the case of Notnats. Further back, we can see the LCFC Ben, after all the pit stops have happened, Ben up into P7 after that wonderful start, but Ben now falling a bit down the order, but he went for that early pit stop, went for a very early pit stop by comparison with everyone else, and seems to be making it work to an extent right now, and Jenkster behind him in P8 chasing after him, having pitted, and Insubordinate as well, having pitted, chasing after these guys, and Will with his pit stop and that disastrous 5th lap now trying to catch up, as we see ZenQ has got past. Hold on a second, what has happened to Notnats? Notnats has dropped down the order. Has he gone into the wall somewhere, or has something gone horrifically wrong for Notnats? And coming through turn 12, he's gone wide. The rear right wheel said, I haven't got the grip, Notnats, and sent him into the wall. And that means that ZenQ is now free, and Spinky Biltong into the pit, so ZenQ takes back the race lead, and Aaron Watt, of course, will be coming back into P2, and Fussy and Fiery on that charge right now will be up into P3 and chasing after Aaron Watt at a significant rate of knots as Notnats comes into the pits, and we've got Pingo Phone, who is going to be inheriting P4 once again, although I think Spinky Biltong is going to be coming out somewhere near him, and I think Pingo has just got ahead of Spinky, but Spinky, for a little bit of strategic play and just consistent driving, has jumped all the way up to P5 from what I think at the time, ladies and gentlemen, was approximately P8, so Spinky gaining 3 places on strategy alone. That is a very impressive amount of work. Hold on, we've got a driver sideways here, and it is Aaron Watt. What on earth has happened to our driver competing for P2 in the championship? Well, we can see that Aaron Watt had a very slow run out of the first corner, and then Fussy and Fiery got sideways into turn 2 and through 3, and as we go to the external camera, Aaron Watt just gets a tank slapper through turn 3, just got too adventurous on the steering and didn't let the car settle, so Aaron Watt drops down to P3 right now, as we see in the rear view camera shot, Pingo Phone being harassed by Spinky. Spinky senses blood in the water. He can see that the podium's right there for him to grab if he can nail it, and he's going for it, so it's going to be all chop and change. He's led 1 lap and now he wants the podium. Well, good luck to him, folks, as he's going to have to get past Pingo Phone and also Aaron Watt, and they're both very fast drivers and very smart drivers as well. But as they come up through turn 8 and up into 9, Will Spinky go for the late move here? He's looking for it, but it's not going to happen. He knows when he's battling with Will, there's no need to go for too many of those late moves, but be ready to send one if you can. But Iron Watt right now in a very difficult situation, and of course he won't want to drop too many more places, because if he's able to hold on right now, he will beat Not Naps to P2 in the Drivers' Championship. But Fussy and Fiery, the surprise element here, we always knew he was fast over tonight's races, but he's in P2 and having pitted as well so early on in the race. By comparison with some of our other drivers, Fussy and Fiery could be bringing home a surprising podium here for himself. An unsuspected podium, no doubt. That's what I was trying to say. As we can see, Iron Watt being pressured by Pingo right now, and while Spinky has fallen back a little bit, of course he could be dragged back into this fight later on in the race with only 3 laps to go and counting. As all of our drivers are making their way onto lap number 8, it's not Nats right now who the pressure is on. He has got to gain at least 3 more places in order to be able to hold on to P2 in the Drivers' Championship by the end of tonight. And as he comes out of turn 14, you can see he's gradually closing up to Jenkster, but it is not at a massive rate of knots. And I think Iron Watt has got the hammer down a little bit and just got some of the consistency back that he's been doing so well with all season, as we see Spinky going sideways out of 3. And as they all come out of turn 4 and into 5 right now, you can see it is no change between the 3 drivers. They're all nailing their lines as best as possible. Well, I say that, and then Spinky goes into the wall, flipping that commentator's curse applying here, and already another driver falls as Spinky recovers the car, but he had a huge gap over Jenkster, so I think Spinky's going to be fine here. Jenkster's only coming up to turn 5 right now, but of course he won't want to make too many more mistakes like that, because it's going to cost him significant points and a great result if he continues to make mistakes like that. But elsewhere around the circuit, we haven't really got anybody closing up too much, although Jenkster is being closed down by Not Nats at the case of about a second a sector, as it would seem right now. And as Not Nats closes very rapidly on the Welshman, he's almost into that slipstream zone in 0.75 seconds. What of us running the real slipstream setting here? And I think Not Nats will be trying to dispense of Jenkster on the next lap, if not at the end of this lap. But we're keeping our eyes out on that radar in case we have any driver spin. We do have a spin at turn 1. It is Tamer spinning at turn 1. That's very unfortunate for the Egyptian driver. And Ben is down in P10 right now in a very quiet position. And Will Becky in P9. Insubordinate, 2.5 seconds down on the battle for P6. It should be pointed out and could become a factor later on in the race. First Jenkster makes his way up towards turn 11 then and through 12. How's he going to do it? Is he going to nail it perfectly here? Nails it very nicely, although I say that goes a little bit wide. Just lets the steering wheel open there to avoid the rear end kicking out. But Not Nats is really breathing down his neck. And Iron Watt into the pits. Again, it should be noted. What on earth is happening here? And that means Iron Watt is going to drop so far down the order. We thought that Iron Watt had had his pit stop already. So Iron Watt dropping down now, and that's going to put him in that's going to put him in approximately P5, if not P6 at this rate. What on earth is happening to Iron Watt, who's come in and come back out, and he's going to drop down to P5, and Not Nats will know now all he needs to do is finish right behind Iron Watt, and it's all over for Iron Watt in battling for the Drivers' Championship P2. And in fact, Not Nats is going to get the move done, and he's going to go for a double here, but Not Nats way too adventurous on the brakes there, and that is a rush of blood to the head, and Not Nats into the wall. That means it's Sabana's having to P2, so all the work he's put in is now scuppered, and that means Iron Watt just needs to bring the car home right now. Let's ride back and see what exactly happened here. I don't know what was going through Not Nats' head at that point, but I can assure you it wasn't brake at the right point, because that went wrong. I think he went for a 2-for-1 special, but got carried away, and look how much he came in like a bullet and then just went wide as a result. And Jenkster did a very good job there to release his car from the side of Not Nats' in order to avoid being taken off with him. That is so unfortunate for the British driver there, but right now up front, who's not unfortunate, is Zane Q, 12.5 seconds ahead of this man here, Fussy and Fiery, who will be absolutely jumping up and down in joy right now at the end of this race should the results finish as they currently stand, because he's just nailed it. He's just simply held on to P2, and there's been nobody to take it from him. As we can see, Pingo Phone drifting through turn 12 and nailing it on exit, and Spinky right now up into P4. After that error coming out of turn 5 on lap number 8, and Spinky doing everything right to recover and finish within the top 5 comfortably, as we can see that Jenkster has got Insubordinate closing on him, a second between these two, and behind them right now Not Nats 4.5 seconds back and having to literally hammer it. Well, this is a very unfortunate situation for Not Nats, and he's got to close it up, because, well, hold on, what on earth has happened to Iron Watt? What on earth has happened to Iron Watt? He's gone miles back down the circuit. Well, I have got no idea what's happening to Aaron Watt right now, ladies and gentlemen, but he seems to be listed as a lap down. And he's completely off our timing screens as we move on to the final lap with ZQ Meister. So with regards to Aaron Watt, folks, I'm not sure what's going on there, but I thought Aaron Watt would come back out in P5 approximately. But we'll wait and find out at the end of the race. But everything completely tits up with regards to our timing screens right now. Probably should put it like that, but go to. And Fussy and Fiery in P2, I can tell you that. And Pingo Phone in P3, getting a little bit wrong coming out of turn 5 there, but still holding it together for the best part of the corner. But the question I'm wondering is, where's Aaron Watt in amongst all of this? Oh, hold on a second. Aaron Watt is now back into P6. I was going to say, what on earth is going on? But what that means is we're Jenks up in a P5. So Aaron Watt got it wrong somewhere, that's for certain, as well as that pit stop, because Jenkster is a good mileage ahead of him. I think that is going to give Notnats the ability to finish P2 in the Drivers' Championship, as we see Tamer getting out of the way of ZQ Meister, who is coming down to the final hairpin for the final time tonight. Well, he did do too well in qualifying, as we see Tamer getting very close to the back of ZQ there. He did do too well in qualifying in terms of missing out on that pole position. He hasn't made it the perfect season, but it's been practically perfect for ZQ as he comes up to the final corner one last time to make it 3 out of 3 tonight. Having had such a great start, it's going to be a hat-trick of wins and a triple-triple in terms of the wins over the course of the season. Congratulations to ZQ, who runs out of fuel on the finish line. Tamir coming across the line, a lap down in P11, and Fussy and Fiery, the British driver, having finished P2 with what a surprise result, but a great one for him and the team. And then behind him, it will be Pingo Phone, the Austrian driver, having done everything right to hold on to P3 by the end of it. And what a fantastic drive by the Austrian as he comes across to complete his race for the podium. And then Speaky Biltong, who would have thought of it? The British driver here, after some adventurous moves, coming home in P4 and one major mistake, but it didn't let him stop down, or did slow him down, and coming home in P4. And then Aaron Watt has passed Jenkster. So I can say, ladies and gentlemen, is that Glock moment, Aaron Watt is going to come home in P5 ahead of Jenkster, but will Notnats finish ahead of him? That's the question. Well, Notnats is going to drag race to the line, and Notnats doesn't pit insubordinate to the lines, which means I think that is going to be P2 in the Drivers' Championship to Aaron Watt by a single point, as Will Becky decides to spin it across the line in P9. And then last but not least of our drivers to finish the race, it'll be LCFC Ben, who's going to be coming home in P10, completing our top 10 and rounding up our drivers for tonight. Congratulations to all of our drivers as always, but most importantly, congratulations to our race winner, our hat-trick winner, Zenku from Poland. What a crazy finale. I mean, if you said that that was all going to happen, good luck to you. Go buy a lottery ticket tomorrow because you can predict the future. But that was absolutely insane for a final race. But subject to any stewards' inquiries, of course, here are your final standings. Zenku making it 3 out of 3 tonight, finishing 10.4 seconds ahead of our surprise second place driver, Fussy and Fiery, who had a lot of pace throughout the evening and it finally materialised in a podium in race number 3. And Pingo Phone rounding up our top 3 and our podium. Fourth place going to Speaky Biltong, another surprise driver who was in the mix throughout, but finally making those results count with his pace. And then Aaron Watt finishing P5 after a very up and down race, and I think just doing enough to finish ahead of Notnats in the Drivers' Championship by a very small pointage. The fastest lap, of course, going to Zenku Meister there, that 157.930, the fastest lap we have seen all evening in race trim, but not as fast as our pole lap for qualifying, set on lap number 9. Goodness me, what a finale, folks. And I'll tell you one thing, if we want the moment of tonight, I'm going to go with Ben on lap number 1 of that race to make that move and pick up so many places. So many places at the start of the race. That was a phenomenal move. But we'll wait and see what else is to come in the future seasons, because with moves like that, And with the drivers, with such a mix of drivers, some of our drivers being faster in terms of qualifying pace, some faster in race trims, some balance between the two, some of them able to pull off bold moves. That's why you want to be part of the GTSRL community, because you don't know what's going to happen week in, week out. But well done to ZenQ for winning EU Division 2 Season 37. A dominant display throughout. Wasn't perfect in terms of missing out the pole lap in round number 3 today, but practically perfect on all other accounts, picking up every single win. And ZenQ just ran away with this one. As we get ready now for King of the Karts. And congratulations to Iron White, who finished P2 and not as pitching P3 in what was a very closely contested battle for the second and third place positions in the Drivers' Championship. And we can definitely say that Team 1 of ZenQ and NotNats will have won the Constructors by a significant margin. So we're just going to do our little bit of warm-up. As we run alongside with Pingo here. Here we go then, it's King of the Karts EU Division 2 time. Change the gearing. Whoopsie boopsie, I forgot to. Oh, well, we'll have to go with what we got here. Well, good start from P12 all the way up to P5 at the end of Sector 1. Well, I'm definitely not going to be the race leader come the end of the start for this straight, I'll tell you that much. Oh, it was a bit messy at the end there. It was a bit messy. It was tight. Good race, though. I'll take that. Worked for it. Oh, goodness me, that was a good fun race, though. Yep, ZenQ picking up 4 out of 4 tonight. Oh, goodness me. Well, that's going to conclude the show really tonight, ladies and gentlemen. As we see, we have got our results confirmed. And we got our daily mileage done. So we will save the King of the Karts replay. There's your final standings from King of the Karts. ZenQ coming home with the win, making it 4 wins out of 4 tonight, ahead of Pingo Phone and Martin Brewer. Olaf and myself rounding off the top 5. Well, thank you very much for tuning in, folks. That is the conclusion of Season 37 in Europe, both for EU Division 1 and now for EU Division 2. It's been a pleasure to bring you both seasons. Of course, I've had the wonderful help of Tenured Frog, who should not be dismissed. Thank you very much to Tenured Frog for standing in on EU Division 1 rounds 1 and 2. And we look forward to what Season 38 brings in a couple of weeks. We've got 3 weeks before Season 38 gets underway with the races. And of course, time trials are at least the next week, if not the next 2 weeks. But I've been your host, Paul TX141, or Britain a Spit, and if you have enjoyed, be sure to let me know, and if you're not already following this Twitch channel, then feel free to do so today. But until next time, as always, stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, but most importantly, remember to stay on track. Good night.